Conversations relating to his stories, 19 Shevat, 186-60. The Rebbe told the story of the burgher and the pauper after he had been told about something written in gold letters. This was after Purim 5569, 1809. Before Purim, he had told the story of the sophisticate and the simpleton, Ibid, number 9, 187-61. Shabbat, Torah Reading Noach, 5570, October 14, 1809. In the evening the Rebbe taught a lesson on eulogizing a Zadok, Likutei Moharan 2, 67. After the departure of Shabbat we went in to him as usual, but he indicated with his hand that we should leave him. We went out at once. We were surprised, because usually he would speak with us a great deal after Shabbat departed. We were somewhat disappointed and went to the house of the Rav of Breslov. After a few hours the Rebbe sent his attendant calling us to come. My friend Reb Naphtali and I came in, and the Rebbe asked us to tell him the news. He would always ask us for the latest news. Reb Naphtali told him what he had heard regarding the French War, i.e. the Napoleonic War. In the course of the conversation we expressed surprise at the speed of Napoleon's rise to prominence. He had started off as a plain servant, and now he was emperor. The Rebbe said, "Who knows what soul he has? It could be it was exchanged, because in the chambers of exchanges the souls are sometimes exchanged." The Rebbe then began to relate how once something like this had happened. The queen had given birth, and her slave woman had given birth at the same time. He went on to tell the whole story of the exchanged children. Rabbi Nachman's Stories number 11. After hearing the story, Reb Naphtali and I had a discussion about the passage where the king's Drew's son gave all the rest of his money to his host. One of us understood that he left the money there because he owed it for his lodgings. The other disagreed, maintaining he had simply left it there. After debating it between ourselves, we went to ask the Rebbe himself. He was involved in his devotions at the time, walking back and forth in the house as he always did. He replied that the king's son just left the money there, not in payment of any debt. Later on, one of the Rebbe's most important followers was there. The Rebbe told him that a change of even a single word of these stories from the way he had told it detracted greatly from the story. He went on, "The thing these two were debating may seem to be a small point, and it would not seem to matter all that much which one was right. But the truth is that a great deal hangs on it. The exact detail matters very much. From this you can understand just a little how far these stories reach, for his thoughts are very deep." Psalms 92-6. Anyone who comprehends even a portion of them to whatever extent he is able is very fortunate. 20 Shevat, 188-62. The Rebbe started the story of the Master of Prayer. Rebbe Nachman's Stories number 12. After a remark he made to Reb Yosef the Chazan of Breslov. The Chazan was there together with some of the Rebbe's other followers. The Chazan's kaftan was torn. The Rebbe said, "Aren't you the prayer leader? All the blessings are drawn down through prayer. Why don't you have a decent kaftan?" The Rebbe went on to say that something similar had once taken place involving a prayer leader, and told the entire story of the Master of Prayer. At the beginning we did not realize he was telling one of his stories. We assumed he was talking about an ordinary incident. Only when he got into the story did we understand the awesomeness of what he was telling us, and that it was one of his stories from ancient years. 189-63. The account of the beginning of the story of the 7 beggars in Rebbe Nachman's Wisdom number 13 states that the Rebbe started by saying, "I will tell you how people once used to rejoice." I understand that the Rebbe prefixed this by saying, "What do you know about how to rejoice when you're in such a depressed state? I will tell you how people once used to rejoice." The Rebbe explicitly said that his stories were completely original and should be told in public. Someone should get up in synagogue and tell one of them. He said they are on the most sublime level. 190-64. Emendation to the account of the telling of the 7 beggars in Rebbe Nachman's Wisdom. After the words, "I cannot put their awesome significance into words," insert, "That Sunday afternoon we were standing around him listening to him speak. In the course of the conversation he made a comment about a particular group which led to a conversation about broad shoulders. From this he was led on to ask where we were in the story. We told him we had finished the 4th day, and he then told us the story of the 5th day in a mood of joy. 21 Shevat, 191-65. The story of the melancholy saint. Rebbe Nachman's Stories, Additional Stories number 16, about the Zadok who once became very depressed and brought himself out of it by reminding himself about God's great love in not making me a Gentile, is recorded as I myself heard it from the Rebbe. Another of the Rebbe's followers told me he heard the story in a slightly different form. The Rebbe related that there was a very great tzaddik who was a master of accounting. Each day he would think over carefully what he had accomplished in his devotions that day. Once he was thinking about what he had been supposed to do that day, and found he had not fulfilled his obligation. He was supposed to walk back and forth in his house a certain number of times, this being one of the devotions required of a man on his exalted level, but he found he had not done so enough that day. As a result, he felt himself very low. He became so depressed that he found it impossible to pull himself out of it. Only when he began thinking about how God did not make me a Gentile, was he able to revive himself. There was another small change in the way the Rebbe told the story that I do not remember. You can understand the great level of the tzaddik in the story when you consider that his very walking back and forth in the house was for him a very high devotion, to the point that when he achieved a little less than he felt he should have done, he was so disappointed that he was virtually unable to pull himself up, until he reminded himself that he did not make me a Gentile. From this you can get a little insight into the devotions of the tzaddikim, and the disappointment they feel if they sense a lack of achievement. 192:66. Related to Rabbi Nachman's stories, additional stories number 17, Two Palaces. When a person serves God but is still on the level of slave, he is still cursed. But there is also a concept of a slave who serves in holiness, such as Moses, the servant of God, Deuteronomy chapter 34 verse 5. Know that there is a mitzvah by means of which it is possible to emerge from the level of slave, the mitzvah of redeeming captives. 22 Shevat, 193:67. The conversation in Rabbi Nachman's Wisdom number 1 took place when we were in the carriage on the Rebbe's final journey from Breslov to Uman. He said that God is very great, but we know absolutely nothing. When the Rebbe said God is very great, he gave emphasis to the word great with a grace and beauty that cannot be communicated in writing. We know nothing, he continued. So much goes on in the world, yet we know absolutely nothing. I asked him, haven't you already said that you now know the goal of all knowledge, to realize one's true ignorance? He replied, from the time I left Breslov until now I again do not know. 194:68. On the subject of medicine and the importance of avoiding physicians completely, the Rebbe said that when a person has someone sick in his house, if someone came and told him to give the patient a blow with a big wooden club, he would certainly be very shocked. Yet when one puts the patient in the hands of the doctor, it is literally like handing him over to a murderer. The doctor's remedies are more harmful than the blow of a murderer. Who would want to kill the patient with his own hands? Just because you have to do something to try and save the patient, does that mean you should hand him over to a doctor? You might as well call someone to beat the patient to death. Understand this. The fact that the Rebbe himself traveled to Lemberg where he received medical treatment contains deeply hidden secrets. He did not go there for the medical treatment, but for other purposes known only to him. It was the same with all his journeys. They all contained awesome mysteries, as when he went to Kamenetz, Novorich, and Sherograd. The secret purposes involved in these journeys were hidden from the eyes of all living. Thus, when he returned from one of these journeys, he told the awesome story of the spider and the fly, saying it explained the reason for his journey. Yet the story itself is a great mystery, as were all his stories and indeed everything he did. The same applies to his journey to Lemberg. Having gotten there, heaven obliged him to submit to medical treatment for reasons known only to him. However, when he returned from there, he spoke out more strongly than ever about the need to avoid medical treatment. Several teachings in Rabbi Nachman's Wisdom deal with this. He had spoken about this subject prior to his trip to Lemberg, but after his return he discussed it more than ever. 23 Shevat, 195:69. The conversation recorded in Rabbi Nachman's Wisdom number 58. Sometimes a thought flashes through your mind was said in the coach while traveling to Cherin for Shabbat Shira, when the Rebbe gave the lesson in Likutei Moharan 1192, Deo, enough for a servant to be like his master, Barakot 58b. This is in the category of Deo ink, on paper, Avot 420. As we were traveling, the Rebbe said a thought had flashed into his mind at that moment, and he then followed with this conversation. Afterwards, he gave me encouragement and consolation, and his sweet words lifted me considerably. He said, nothing will be of any account in comparison with the spiritual delight you will have. It isn't enough to make things good for a person only in the world to come. One should make things good for himself in this world as well. The Rebbe spoke to me so intimately and lovingly that tears of joy came to my eyes. less than after the conversation that began, "How do we allow God to think about and bring evil to the world?" Rabbi Nachman's Wisdom number 70. The Rebbe lightheartedly added, "O God, do not keep dammies silent." Psalms 83-2. That is, we should not allow God to damn and think, greater than. 196-70. The Rebbe taught that during prayer one has to work himself up like someone working himself into a temper. Rabbi Nachman's Wisdom number 74. He related this teaching to the sage's statement, "A person should always work his good inclination up against his bad inclination." Barakot 5a. The word used for working is yargis, from the root rajas, meaning anger. A person has to work himself up into a temper for holiness. 24 Shevat. 197-71. Supplement to Rebbe Nachman's Wisdom number 89, there are bundles and bundles of sins to be inserted after the words that now can return to God. One sin causes another sin. Avot 4-2. Sins are sorted into different types. The first offense of a certain type of sin is the first in its bundle. This sin causes the other type similar to this sin to be committed. The prayer introducing the 13 attributes of divine mercy speaks of how God removes the first sin first. We should understand this as meaning that God removes the first sin in each bundle. Otherwise, why should the prayer use the word first twice? There can be only one first. Clearly the prayer is referring to the first sin in each bundle, there being more than one bundle. When God removes the first sin in each bundle, all the other sins in the bundle are left without life. Previously they were dependent on the first sin in their respective bundle. They were actually caused by it. But with the removal of the first sin, their root is nullified and they have no remaining life force. Thus all the other sins in the various bundles now come to God, asking for life. God himself then gives them their life force, thereby releasing the sinner from them. There is no more need for him to give them life, seeing as he has succeeded in arousing God's mercy until he removes the first, i.e. the first sin in each bundle. This explains the meaning of the verse, "I will teach sinners your ways and the Chatoim transgressors will return to you." Psalms 51-15. Your ways is the 13 attributes of mercy, which were revealed after Moses said, "Let me know your ways." Exodus chapter 33 verse 13. When we contemplate the 13 attributes and endeavor to fulfill them in practice, then God removes the first. He removes the first sin in each bundle of sins. It is then that the Chatoim will return to you. Chatoim bears the translation of sins. The verse dictates how the remaining sins in each bundle return to God in order to receive life from him. Now that their root has been cut off with the removal of the first sin in each bundle after the arousal of the 13 attributes of mercy. But from where does God give them life? We must now understand how God sustains these angels of destruction. 25 Shevat. 198-72. See Rebbe Nachman's Wisdom number 98. The Rebbe then spoke wondrous words. Winter is pregnancy and summer is birth. The Rebbe then spoke wondrous words, but they were mostly forgotten. He spoke of the summer which was then approaching. This took place in Nisan shortly before Pesach, on the third day after the circumcision of the Rebbe's son Shlomo Ephraim, of blessed memory. The Rebbe then said that in the winter all plants and grasses die, their strength is dissipated and they are like the dead. But when the summer comes they awaken and return to life. When summer begins to approach, it is very good to meditate in the fields. This is a time when you can pray to God with longing and yearning. Meditation and prayer is sicha. A bush of the field is a siach. When every bush, siach of the field begins to return to life and grow, they all yearn to be included in prayer and meditation, sicha. The Rebbe then spoke at length about this. He also discussed several other matters. 199-73. See Rebbe Nachman's Wisdom number 39, you should strike your head against the wall of your heart. We later heard that the Rebbe once said that this is the meaning of the passage Hezekiah turned his face to the wall. Isaiah chapter 38 verse 2. The face that he turned was his awareness, bringing it inside the walls of his heart, Yerushalmi, Barakot 4a. For one's true face is his mind, which illuminates the face from within. 26 Shevat, 274. On the subject of healing and medicine, the Rebbe said that the chapter on healing in Sefer Hamadat, the Aleph Bet book, originally contained all the cures in the world. There was not a single illness whose cure was not included. However, he did not want this copied and burned it. 201-75. The Aleph Bet book, Knowledge B, 1 states, "No, each world and every creation has its own particular form and unique construction. For example, the build of the lion differs from that of the sheep. These distinctions between creations are alluded to in the forms of the Hebrew letters and their combinations. One who merits understanding the Torah is able to understand these differences between all the creations. I feel this teaching relates to a conversation I heard from the Rebbe before Shabbat Hanukkah 5565, 1804, about the different creatures in the world, Rabbi Nachman's Wisdom number 306. He said then that the forms and shapes of every human being are all included in the word Adam, man, where it appears in the Torah, Genesis chapter 1 verse 26. As soon as God said the word Adam, He included every human likeness in it. The same applies to the words behema, animal, and chaya, beast, in the account of creation. Those words contain the forms of all animals and beasts. The same applies to other creatures. The Rebbe spoke about this at length, and said that there are categories of wisdom even in this world on which one can subsist without any other food or drink. Cf. Likutei Moharan 1, 19-8. The Rebbe spoke at length, but it was not written down. 202:76. The same passage in the Aleph Bet book ends by saying that one who merits understanding the Torah will also know what they, the creations, have in common, namely their origin and their end, in which they are identical, without distinction. It could be that the Rebbe had the same idea in mind in the lesson in Likutei Moharan 2:39. Go and see the works of God. Each thing has a beginning and ultimate end. It may be that he meant here that one has to succeed in understanding how in their beginning and ultimate end all things are a unity without distinctions. At the time I first heard this lesson from him, I was not able to understand it well. When the Rebbe saw my written version, he said that in this lesson I had not understood his meaning. He said, "This is not what I said, and this is not even what I meant to say." It could be that his meaning was what I have written here, which I did not include in my version. This would be why he said of the written version that I had not understood his meaning. 27 Shevat 203:77. The Rebbe said, "Through diligence it is easy to become the leader and provider of the generation physically or spiritually. Thus, go to the ant, lazy one." Proverbs chapter 6 verse 6. Nimala, the word for ant, the epitome of diligence, is spelled out by the last letters of the words. Meshem ro even Yisrael, from there the shepherd, the rock of Israel. Genesis chapter 49 verse 24, which contains the concept of leader and provider. To be appointed leader and provider depends on the diligence learned from the ant, for from there is the shepherd, the rock of Israel. This idea appears in the Aleph Bet book, Zealousness B1, in a form slightly different from the way I heard it from the Rebbe personally. 204:78. The lesson in Likutei Moharan I 44, You are standing this day, Deuteronomy chapter 29 verse 9, was given on the Shabbat before Rosh Hashanah 5563, 1802, the first Shabbat after I had become his follower. In this lesson the Rebbe speaks about clapping hands during prayer. In the period when he gave this lesson, which was very shortly after his entry into Breslov, he spoke a great deal about clapping hands while praying. He told me that when he first entered Breslov, he once stood at the door of the study hall in his house and took everyone to task for not praying properly. He said one did not hear hand-clapping from anyone during the prayers. From this we immediately understood that he wanted to restore the crown to its former glory and inspire people to pray again with the same intensity and passion as the early Chassidim in the days of the Baal Shem Tov, Tovet Zechronot 5, and his students in previous generations. For in the early years of the Rebbe's lifetime the Chassidic movement had cooled. The Rebbe made great efforts to rectify this and restore the crown to its former glory. 28 Shevat. Prior to this last Shabbat before Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe had had a visit from two prominent Chassidim who had eaten with him. In the course of the conversation, the two Chassidim ridiculed a certain man in Nemirov who used to clap his hands a great deal while praying. The Rebbe took exception to their comments and told them harshly, "How do you know what it means to clap one's hands while praying and everything it involves? What right do you have to make fun of this man whose hand-clapping does not meet your approval?" The Shabbat after this, the Shabbat before Rosh Hashanah, I came to the Rebbe for Shabbat, and it was then that he gave the lesson, You are standing this day, which discusses hand-clapping while praying. This was the first lesson I ever heard from him, and I immediately wrote it down, Praise to the God of my life. A few weeks later, after Sukkot, the man who had been with the Rebbe before Rosh Hashanah and who had ridiculed the hand-not-clapping of the man in Nemirov came to the Rebbe to ask him to intercede for his son who was sick. The Rebbe showed him a passage in the Pri-Eitz Hayim, Shar Chazarat Amida 7, relating the initial letters of the words in the priestly blessing, Vayasam Leka Shalom, He will give you peace. Numbers chapter 6 verse 26, to the word shalev, as in the verse, I was shalev at ease and he broke me asunder. Job chapter 16 verse 12. The Rebbe told the man to read out the passage, and he had to do so. Afterwards the Rebbe told him the lesson about hand-clapping in Likutei Moharan I 46, discussing the three hands and so on. However, the man refused to incline his shoulder to bear the yoke of Torah and become a follower of the Rebbe. The man returned home, and his son's condition became more serious. He told me the entire story of how the Rebbe had dealt with him, and the lesson he had given. He also told me that the Rebbe had related a story about a certain aristocrat who was extremely hard and brazen, but I do not remember the story very well. The man asked me when I went to the Rebbe to remind him about the boy's illness and ask him to help. Soon afterwards I went to the Rebbe and spoke with him about this. He said, "The boy is still alive?" in a tone of surprise. I stood there trembling, because I understood from this that the boy's decree of death was already sealed. The Rebbe said, if this man had accepted what I said, the boy would already be healthy. But now it was impossible for the boy to live. And indeed, the boy died shortly afterwards. When the Rebbe spoke to me about the man, I started making excuses for him, saying, how can he become your follower when he already has a leader, namely one of the Rebbe's opponents? The Rebbe replied, if so, it is a big test for him. In other words, this did not mean it would be impossible for him to become the Rebbe's follower, only that his test would be greater. He should certainly make every effort to withstand the test, overcome all the obstacles, and become the Rebbe's follower. 29 Shevat 205:79. The lesson in Likutei Moharan 2:2, the days of Hanukkah are days of thanksgiving, as in the thanksgiving offering, was given on Shabbat Hanukkah, in the year the Rebbe returned from Lemberg. My feeling is that with this lesson the Rebbe was, as it were, offering a thanksgiving offering for having returned home safely. His safe return was a miracle for us and for all Israel, because had he remained in Lemberg, it is possible that his light would have been extinguished, and we would not have heard all the awesome teachings he revealed afterwards, and in particular, his stories, because most of the major stories, like the 7 beggars, were revealed only later on. For such a miracle it was certainly fitting to bring a thanksgiving offering. Several times after his return from Lemberg, we heard him say that he gave praise and thanks to God for having returned from there. Whenever he traveled after this, if he came to a place he had been to prior to his journey to Lemberg, he would say he gave praise to God for having brought him back there. For I believed I would never come back and see them again. 30 Shevat 206:80. At the end of the above lesson, there is a passage explaining the verse, it happened at the end of 2 years. Genesis chapter 41 verse 1, in relation to the sage's statement about the one-day student, Chagiga 5b. This was said because of one young man from Breslov who wanted to be with the Rebbe for Shabbat Hanukkah, but was delayed in Nemirov and could not reach Breslov in time for Shabbat. He came after Shabbat. When the Rebbe gave the lesson on Shabbat, he did not finish explaining the verse TT happened in relation to the teachings asterisk contained in the lesson. It was when this young man arrived after Shabbat that the Rebbe began his explanation of the verse, relating less than it to the sage's statement about the one-day student. This was connected with the young man's arrival, for he was literally a one-day student. On Shabbat he was not with the Rebbe. Only on the next day, day 1 of the new week, did he come. It was precisely through him that this teaching, so closely bound up with his coming, was revealed. I find it very difficult to express what I really want to communicate, while the Rebbe's words were precisely measured. This was especially evident on this occasion. On Shabbat, the Rebbe did not explain the verse at all, because the revelation of Torah teachings is dependent on the souls present to hear them. Only afterwards, when this young man came, did the Rebbe reveal the explanation of the first words of the verse in relation to the lesson. As for the remaining words of the verse, he did not finish explaining them. I pressed him, but he would not be persuaded in any way. Here I again saw how his every word was precisely measured according to the souls present and their desire. Similarly, the explanation in the lesson about the 4 things that Rabbi Eliezer used as proof, the carob tree, etc., see Bava Metzia 59b, was given only in very general terms when the Rebbe taught the main lesson. He did not give the detailed discussion printed in the text until his brother Reb Yeshiel came with some other people. They too had wanted to come for this Shabbat and had also been delayed. Only after their arrival did the Rebbe reveal the teaching about the 4 proofs in detail. New Stories, 1 Adar, 207:81, the year 5665, 1805. I was standing by the table and bending over the sea, and all the nations and all the kings stood and gazed and were amazed. It was the table of kings, the sea of wisdom, namely, that I will reveal wisdom such that even, etc. Cf. Likutei Moharan 2, 710, 208, 82. The year 5667, 1807. Breslov, the week of Torah reading Vayechi. Reb Nozon writes, after I had sanctified the moon by myself, Rabbi Nachman said to me, if you were happy it would be a great favor to the world. After this he told me the following dream. Tremendous numbers of soldiers were going along, and flying after them were tremendous numbers of birds. Something extraordinary. I asked the person by my side, why are these birds flying behind them? He told me they were going to help the soldiers. How will they help them? I asked. He told me that these birds exude a certain fluid by means of which the opposing forces depart, and this is how they help these soldiers. But this was hard for me to understand. Isn't the place where they leave this fluid the very place where these soldiers are? The fluid will hurt them too. In the meantime, I noticed that the birds had started to descend, until they were all standing on the ground. They were walking after the soldiers, and they were picking something off the ground with their beaks. It was something round, but it wasn't food. It was hard for me to understand how these birds could come up and walk behind the soldiers, because a man can walk much more quickly than birds. And what was it they were gathering? They told me that it was from the thing they were gathering that this fluid with which they killed the opposing forces was produced. And wherever they left the fluid, this caused the departure and death of the opposing forces in the place where they were. There were a number of things here that I found hard to understand, but I don't remember them. To Adar. I went into a hidden place, and I saw that there was a very low entrance. I went in there and lay myself down. There were no windows in that room. It was dark there. I went in there because I wanted to hide. I hid there. In the meantime, all the birds started to come in there. I wanted to drive them away, and I was using my hand to make them fly away. But there was a cat standing in front of them, and birds naturally try to escape from a cat. This was why they had all come into the room. No matter how hard I tried to shoo them away and make them fly off, it didn't help because of the cat. I asked them why they had come here. They said to me they had come here to have the pox. I asked why. They said to me that the pus of the pox is the fluid that kills the opposing forces. I said that surely they themselves can die from the pox also. They told me that this was in fact true, and that the dead bodies of those of them that die are very harmful to the place where they die. I felt terrible because I was afraid I might die from the stench of the rotting corpses, because there were tremendous numbers of birds there. I prayed to God about this. In the meantime, the pox went away and they became healthy again. One of the birds flew off from there in joy. Then they all flew off after him, and there was a great cry throughout the world, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. And I also roared out, Mazel Tov, Yemi Moharnat 15, 209-83. The beginning of the summer of 5564, 1804. The Rebbe said, I will tell you what I saw, and you tell your children. There was someone lying on the ground, and around him people were sitting in a circle. Around this circle was another circle, and around that circle was another circle, and so on, many circles. Then around them were sitting yet more people in no particular order. The one who was sitting in the middle, he was leaning on his side, was moving his lips, and all those around were moving their lips after him. After this I looked, and he was not there, the one in the middle, that is, and all those sitting around stopped moving their lips. I asked, what is this? They answered me that he had become cold and had expired and had stopped speaking. 3 Adar. After this they all started to run, and I ran after them. I saw 2 palaces, very fine, beautiful buildings. Sitting there were 2 commanders. They all ran to these 2 commanders and started arguing with them. Why did you deceive us? They wanted to kill them. The commanders fled outside. I saw them, and their nature was very good in my eyes. I ran after them, and I saw in the distance a beautiful tent. From there they cried out to the commanders, turn back and seek out all the merits you have and take them in your hands and go to the light that is hanging there. There you will accomplish everything you want. They turned back and took their merits. There were bundles of merits there, and they ran to the light. I ran after them, and X saw a gleaming light suspended in the air. The commanders came Y, and threw their merits to the light. From the light sparks fell into their mouths. Then the Ner lamp turned into a Nahar river, and everyone drank from the river, and creatures were formed inside them. When they started to speak, the creatures came out of them, and I saw them running and returning. They were neither men nor any kind of animal, just creatures. After this they decided to go back to their place. But they said, how can we go back to our place? Someone said, we should send to the one who stands there holding a sword that reaches from heaven to earth. They said, Whom should we send? They thought they should send for the creatures, and the creatures went there. I ran after them, and I saw him. He was terrifying. His stature reached from the heaven to the earth. In his hand was a sword reaching from heaven to earth. It had many blades. One of them was sharp. This was for killing. One of them was for poverty, one of them for weakness. There were also many other blades for other punishments. They started pleading, "All this long time we have been suffering at your hands. Now help us and bring us to our place." He said, "I cannot help you." They pleaded, "Give us the blade for death and we'll kill them." But he did not want to. They asked for a different blade, but he did not want to give them a single blade. They went back. For Adar, in the meantime there was an order to kill the commanders, and they cut off their heads. Meanwhile, the sequence of events returned to what it had been before, namely that someone was lying on the ground surrounded by circles of people and so on. They ran to the commanders. Everything happened as described before, except that now I saw that the commanders did not throw their merits to the light. They simply took their merits and went to the light and broke their hearts and began to beg and make entreaties before the light, and sparks fell from the light into their mouths. They entreated more, and the light turned into a river and the creatures were formed and so on. They told me, "These ones will live," because the first ones deserved to be killed for throwing their merits to the light and not making entreaties like these latter ones. I didn't know what this meant. They said to me, "Go to that room and they will tell you the explanation of this." I went, and there sat an old man. I asked him about the matter. He took his beard in his hand and said to me, "My beard is the explanation of what happened. I still don't know," one said. "Go to that room," he replied, "and there you will find the explanation." I went there and saw a room infinitely long and broad, entirely filled with writings. Wherever I opened, I saw the explanation of the story. Reb Nachman writes, "All this I heard directly from his holy lips." He said that all his Torah lessons contain references to this vision, and the entire lesson beginning 9 Tikkunim, Likutei Moharan I 20, is a commentary on it. Someone with understanding will see in this lesson numerous remarkable references to the vision. Note the explanation given there of the opening of the heart, a concept alluded to in the verse, "He opened a rock, and waters gushed out," Psalms 105-41. These are the rivers mentioned in the vision. If you understand the whole lesson well, you will be able to understand some of the allusions in this awesome vision, Parpareat Lachakma, Lach, CIT, regarding the person who was sitting on the ground, and then later on, when the Rebbe looked again, he was no longer there, and they told him he had become cold and had expired. This is the same idea as the soul referred to in the lesson, a soul racked by suffering. This suffering is characterized by the sage's picture of the way of the Torah. Bread with salt you shall eat, Avot 6-4, cited in the lesson. The same Mishnah continues, "On the ground you shall sleep." Possibly the fact that in the vision this person was lying on the ground is an allusion to this Mishnah, the circles of people surrounding him, and then the people sitting in no particular order, seem to parallel the idea of how everyone receives from this soul. This is because this soul is the source of all Torah explanations. Possibly the way all the people were moving their lips is an allusion to this, namely that they were revealing Torah explanations. This is why when the one in the middle, who corresponds to this soul, became cold and expired, all the others stopped moving their lips and speaking. For when this soul becomes cold, i.e., departs, there is no strength to draw forth Torah explanations, as explained in the lesson. If you examine the vision and the lesson in great detail, you will be able to understand more awesome allusions. 5 Adar. The incident where they ran to the commanders and started arguing with them contains the concept of strife and controversy, the opposition that is aroused against the Tzaddikim when the power to draw forth Torah explanations is withdrawn. Possibly the commanders are an allusion to Moses and Aaron, who died because of the waters of strife, Numbers chapter 20 verse 13, because they made the mistake of not begging and entreating, as explained in the lesson. Understand this well, as regards the light from which sparks fell into their mouths, and then the light turned into a river. This is the concept of heated words that are drawn from the supernal heart through the arousal of God's love for the Tzaddik as he is about to reveal Torah. The supernal heart is opened and words are sent down, and through this the Tzaddik draws forth Torah explanations from this place also, as it is written, "He opened a rock and waters gushed out." In the vision the light turned into a river. The light is an allusion to the heart, which is a gleaming light. At first sparks fell from there into their mouths. This is the concept of the heated words that are drawn from the heart, which in the story was called a light. Afterwards the light itself turned into a river. This is the concept of Torah explanations that are also drawn from the heart, the light. As it is written, He opened a rock and waters gushed out. The incident where they threw up their merits signifies that they mentioned their merits and their good deeds, and made use of a staff of strength in order to draw forth Torah. The creatures that were formed inside them and that emerged, when they opened their mouths, correspond to the spiritual powers or angels formed from the letters of the original Torah ideas, revealed by the Zadok. These angels draw their strength from Edom, referred to in the concept of the one holding a sword in his hand, for he is appointed over the sword and over all the punishments of the wicked. These punishments are alluded to in the various blades possessed by the sword. At times the wicked have to be punished with death by the sword, at other times with different punishments as explained in the lesson. However, because of the mistake, the one with the sword was unwilling to hand over any blade at all. He did not want to give them any strength. What they really should have done was break their hearts and beg and entreat, even though they take their merits with them in their hands, the staff of strength. This is for another purpose, to subdue the evil in the assembly. However, drawing forth Torah requires love and entreaty. 6 Adar. Examine the Reb's lesson carefully in conjunction with this vision, and you will understand more amazing allusions. You will see the wonders of God to the degree your perception reaches, and you will see how deep are His thoughts. Yet even if we do succeed in finding certain allusions, the entire vision remains sealed and mysterious, infinitely so. Nonetheless, whatever we can glean will benefit us greatly spiritually. It is a wonderful thing for a person to immerse himself in the words of our holy Rebbe. There is no one to compare with him. It is impossible to praise him without detracting from his splendor, God forbid, because to add is to diminish. As in the story of the king who possessed vast stores of gold, yet they praised him for his silver. See Barakot 33b. Wherever you find some praise of the Rebbe, you must understand that it is nothing, not even a drop in the ocean, compared to his true greatness. It is impossible to praise him adequately, because he was completely concealed from human understanding. Even great Tzaddikim in their own right are unable to fathom his greatness. We simply have no comprehension of him at all, except for the little we can pick up from the awesome Torah teachings revealed in his holy books, and the wondrous stories and visions presented here. Each person can form a small estimate of where the Reb's exalted power and holiness reach. Happy is the man born of woman who was worthy of such a level, climbing ever higher. The mouth cannot utter it, nor the heart conceive it, and even if we could relate a fraction of his praises from what we saw with our eyes, at the present time discretion prompts us to remain silent because of the intensity of the opposition. Additional comments regarding the incident in the vision where they requested a blade, the blade of death, and the one holding the sword refused to give it, and then they requested a different blade and he also refused. This signifies that they wanted to punish the wicked with the sword and with death, but he did not want to give them this strength. Accordingly, they went on to request that at all events he should entrust them with another punishment to use against the wicked, but he was wholly opposed to granting their requests. All this came about because of the commander's mistake in throwing their merits up to the light. 7 Adar. As to their request that he give them strength so as to be able to return, this alludes to their intention of going to the land of Israel. They needed to receive a degree of strength from him in order to punish the wicked so as to come to the land of Israel. Understand this well regarding their statement to the one with the sword that they had been suffering at his hands for a long time now. The underlying idea is the same as that contained in what the children of Israel said to Edom. You know about all the troubles we encountered. Numbers chapter 20 verse 14. They specifically said you know, because all the punishments are under his control. The statement by the Zakan, the old man, that his zakan, beard, was the explanation of the entire incident corresponds to the fact that the entire Torah lesson referred to above is alluded to in the concept of old man. Thus the Rebbe explains at the end of the lesson that all the ideas contained in it are encapsulated in the concept of 9 tikkunim, in relation to the beard. See his explanation there. Later on the whole sequence was repeated, with someone lying on the ground as before and so on. This time the commanders were careful not to throw their merits to the light. Instead they simply took their merits and went to the light, pouring out their hearts, begging and entreating. Of these commanders it was said that they would live. The first two, on the other hand, deserved the death penalty for throwing their merits to the light instead of begging and entreating like the latter pair. Underlying all this is the idea that the main mistake of Moses was that he did not draw from the waters of Torah with appeals and entreaties for tender mercy. Instead he used his staff of strength, as when he struck the rock and so forth. This is the reason why now they were careful only to beg and entreat and appeal for tender mercy. In this way they will live. May it be your will that our righteous Mashiach should come speedily in our days and bring us in peace to the holy land of Israel. Then everything will be restored speedily in our days. Amen. 8 Adar, 210-84, shortly before Rosh Hashanah 5569. At the end of the summer of 5568 1808, the Shochet ritual slaughterer of Teplik brought the Rebbe a very special chair. In the same period the Rebbe related a vision or dream he had had. They brought him a chair. It was surrounded by fire. The whole world was going to see this chair, men, women, and children. On their way back from there, all of a sudden they all became paired up with each other, and marriage relationships were forged between them. All the leaders of the era also went to see the chair. I asked, how far away is it, and for what reason were marriage pairs suddenly formed? I went in a circle around them in order to get there, and I heard that Rosh Hashanah would soon be coming. I wasn't sure whether to return or to remain there. I was undecided. I said in my heart, how can I stay here for Rosh Hashanah? But intellectually I thought, considering my physical weakness, why should I go back? So there I was, and I came to the chair, and there I saw Rosh Hashanah, the real actual Rosh Hashanah. The same with Yom Kippur, the real actual Yom Kippur. The same with Sukkot, the real actual Sukkot. And I heard that they were shouting, your new moons and festivals my soul hates. Isaiah chapter 1 verse 14. What business have you to judge the world? Rosh Hashanah itself will judge. Then they all fled together with the leaders of the era. Everyone fled. I saw that the chair was inscribed with the forms of all the creatures in the world. Every single one was inscribed there, together with his marriage partner next to him. This was the reason why all the marriage pairs had been formed, because each one was able to see and find his marriage partner there. Something I had been studying during the previous few days now came into my mind. There is a verse that says, his throne was fiery flames, Daniel chapter 7 verse 9. The first letters of the words Karseye Shevivan D Nur, his throne was fiery flames, spell out the word Shadkan, matchmaker, for it was through the chair that the marriage pairs were made. Furthermore, the word Karseye is made up of the initial letters of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, which is why Shemini Atzeret is the time of the marital union of the supernal matron. Zohar 3, 96b, 9070. Nanadar, what shall I do for my livelihood? I asked. They told me I would be a matchmaker. The fire went around it in a circle, because the truth is that Rosh Hashanah is a great goodness to the world. It is the season when the moon is hidden, and of this it is said, bring an atonement for me. Chulin 60b. This is a great goodness to the whole world, because it is through this that we are able to beg for atonement on Rosh Hashanah. Reb Nozon writes, See Likuti Maharan 2, 1, blow the shofar on the new moon, and out of the rib he made. The entire lesson is a commentary and explanation of this vision or dream. The lesson was given on Rosh Hashanah after the Rebbe had related what he had seen. The meaning of what the Rebbe related is very veiled and concealed, and part of it is missing because it was not written down in full. Once the Rebbe was speaking about these visions, and he came to mention the link between this particular vision and the above-mentioned lesson. He said how awesome and exalted they are to anyone with a heart to understand. Then he said, if you are not happy, I don't know what is with you. What he meant was that by rights we should be very happy all the time, having been worthy of having a taste of such awesome lights. When the Rebbe related this vision, he said, you'll be able to develop Torah ideas out of this all the days of your lives. He told us off for not being happy and said we should be very, very happy. 10 Adar, 211-85. Less than Rabbi Nachman relates, I had a dream. It was Yom Kippur, and it was obvious to me that each year on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, would offer someone as a sacrifice. A sacrifice was now being sought, and I volunteered. They asked me to confirm this in writing, and I did so. Afterwards, when it came time for me to be sacrificed, I had a change of heart. I wanted to hide, but with everyone around me, how could I avoid being seen? I decided to leave town. Indeed, I started to leave, only to turn around and find myself back in the center of town. I thought of hiding among the non-Jews, but I realized that if everyone came looking for me, they would certainly hand me over. Then someone was found who was willing to be sacrificed instead of me. Even so, I am still afraid of what the future holds. Reb Nozon adds, this dream was not recorded properly, and the conclusion was omitted. I recall hearing that it was Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, the Berdichover Rav, who agreed to take the Reb's place. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak did in fact pass away not long afterwards on the 25th of Tishrei 5570. As for the Reb's concluding words, I am still afraid of what the future holds. This too came to be as Rabbi Nachman passed away after Yom Kippur of the following year, greater than the year 5569, 1808. First day Hanukkah after the lighting of the Hanukkah lamp in the evening. Rabbi Nachman relates, a visitor came into a house and asked the head of the house, "From what do you make a living?" "I don't have a fixed livelihood at home," his host replied. "But the world provides me with what I need to live." The guest asked him, "What do you learn?" The host answered him, and they continued talking together until they were talking in real earnest heart to heart. The host began to feel a tremendous longing and yearning to know how to reach a certain level of holiness. "I will learn with you," said the guest. 11 Adar. The host was surprised, and he started thinking, perhaps this isn't a human being at all. But he looked again and saw that he was talking to him normally like a human being. But immediately afterwards he felt a strong sense of faith, and he resolved to believe in him. He started calling him my teacher, and said to him, "First of all, I would like to request that you teach me how I should conduct myself with due respect for beings like yourself. Not I need scarcely add that I could really detract from your true glory, God forbid. But even so it is hard for human beings to be as meticulous as they should be in these matters. That is why I want you to teach me how to behave with due respect, but for the moment I haven't the time," he answered. "Another time I will come to you and teach you this. Right now I must go away from here." "Well, I also need to learn from you about this," said the host. "How far do I have to go when I accompany you on your way, as the host is bound to do when his guests depart?" "Till outside the entrance," he replied. The host began to think to himself, "How can I go out with him? For the moment I am with him among ordinary beings, but if I go out with him alone, who knows who he is?" he asked him, saying, "I am afraid to go out with you." "If I can learn with you just like this," the visitor replied, "then surely if I want to do anything else to you, who is going to stop me?" The host went with him out of the entrance. All of a sudden he seized him and started to fly with him. It was cold for the host, so the other took a garment and gave it to him. "Take this garment," he said, "and it will be good for you. You will have food and drink, and everything will be good, and you will live in your house." 12 Adar. He went on flying with him. Meanwhile the host suddenly noticed that he was in his house. He couldn't believe that this was he himself in his own house. But he looked carefully, and sure enough he was speaking with ordinary human beings and eating and drinking normally. But then he again noticed that he was flying as before. Then he looked again, and lo and behold, he was in his house. Again he noticed that he was flying. And so it went on for quite a time. After a time he set him down in a valley between two mountains. There the man found a book in which there were various combinations of letters. Aleph, Zion, Chet, and Dalet, etc. Inside the book there were drawings of various vessels, and inside the vessels there were letters. Also inside the vessels were the letters belonging to the vessels. That is, through these letters it was possible to make the vessels themselves. The man had a tremendous desire to study the book. But then he noticed that there he was in his house. He took another look and he was there in the valley. He decided to ascend the mountain in case he could find some kind of habitation there. When he came to the mountain he saw a tree of gold standing there with golden branches. Hanging from the branches were vessels like those drawn in the book, and inside the vessels were other vessels through which these first vessels could be made. He wanted to take the vessels from there, but he wasn't able to, because they were all tangled up in the branches. Meanwhile he noticed that he was in his house. It was something extraordinary to him. How was it that one moment he could be here and the next moment there? He wanted to speak about it to other human beings, but how can one explain something incredible like this to other people? They would find it hard to believe. At this moment he looked through the window and saw the same visitor. He started begging him to come in to him, but the visitor said, "I don't have time because I'm on my way to you." "Ibis in itself is something amazing to me," said the man. "I'm right here." "What do you mean that you are on your way to me?" he answered him. "As soon as you showed yourself willing to go with me and accompany me beyond the entrance, I took the neshama, soul, from you, and gave it a garment from the lower Garden of Eden. The nephesh, ruach, spirit, remains with you. This is why when you attach your thought to that place, you are there and you draw the radiance of that place over yourself. Then when you return here, you are here. I do not know from which world he is, but this much is certain. He is from a world of good. So far it is not finished. It is not completed. 13 Adar, 212-86. The year 5569, 1808-09. Rabbi Nachman had a dream in which there was a gathering of Jews with one leader of worldwide stature. A decree had been passed to kill all the Jews. This leader came up with the idea that the thing to do was to turn himself into a non-Jew. He went and called a barber to shave off his beard and sidelocks. But afterwards it transpired that it was not true. There had been no such decree. The humiliation of that leader, it was certainly impossible for him to show his face in public. He had no alternative but to uproot himself and flee. But how could he get outside the door? How was he going to hire a carriage and go, etc.? Without a doubt he suffered tremendous shame and humiliation. Indescribably so. Doubtless he had to stay for some time with a non-Jew until his beard grew again. This is what Rabbi Nachman was shown in his dream, less than regarding the false leaders of his day, greater than. 213:87, the year 5564, 1803-4, Shabbat Eve after Kiddush. Rabbi Nachman relates, I dreamed that I was inside a city, and in the dream it seemed that the city was very great. There came to this place a great Zadok. He was one of the old Tzaddikim, who was acknowledged to be a great Zadok. Everyone went to him, and I also went to him. But I saw that everyone was passing him right by without greeting him. It seemed that they were doing this intentionally, and I was very surprised that they could have the audacity to do such a thing because I knew that he was a great Zadok. I asked how they could have the audacity not to greet him on purpose. The answer was that he really was a great Zadok, but the body that he has was put together from many places. The unclean places, he himself was a great man, and he had taken it upon himself to make a tikkun for this body. It is wrong to greet one's friend in unclean places. Shabbat 10a. That is why they did not greet him. 14 Adar. 214:88. One weekday. Rabbi Nachman relates, I dreamed that there was a wedding. There were many brides there, but one bride stood out from all the others, and to nullify these Roman decrees, as soon as he was found out, the decrees were reinstated. Everyone there considered her more important than the others. Bands of musicians were there playing music. Then I saw that a door had been opened, and they were going into the study hall. An enormous number of people were gathering in the study hall. When I saw that the numbers were swelling and swelling, I was trying to work out how I would be able to get in amid such a crowd. I hurried over and stood behind them. There was the head of the academy studying with them. The true glory of the Torah shone there. The brides were dancing, especially the bride who had stood out from all the others. Each time the band played a particular melody, she would sing the melody herself afterwards. True honor and respect for Torah were in that place. I was amazed at the honor that was shown to the Torah there. I spoke to some people I recognized there. Have you seen honor for the Torah like we see here? I said. It would appear that they were occupied with the study of revealed Torah, as opposed to mysticism. Because, as far as I could see, they were rabbis, and the books they were using indicated the same thing. They were the very large volumes usually associated with this kind of study. 215:89. The Reb's holy conversation after the departure of Shabbat, Torah reading Toldot 5570, 1809. Breslov. Throughout the seasons of the year, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Hoshana Rabbah, Shemini Atzeret, Hanukkah, Filled Square Purim, before it Tu B'Shvat, Pesach, Shavuot, etc. With every season that comes, I am not what I was before, Reb Nozon writes. The import of his words was that with each successive season he achieved an entirely new perception and understanding, and he did not serve God with the same devotions that he had used at the same time in previous years. With each successive year he achieved a totally new perception, and there were new devotions that he had to practice. Rabbi Nachman went on. At Hanukkah time last year I lit the candles and carried out the other Hanukkah customs using the devotions contained in the Torah teachings given over then. Similarly, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and so on, the Rebbe continued. His devotions were in accordance with the Torah teachings given over on Rosh Hashanah, only with greater subtlety. That is, his devotions involved greater subtlety than what had actually been given over in the Torah discourse. 15 Adar, 216:90. On Purim I had revelations, the Rebbe said. The Torah is the name of the Holy One, blessed be He. Tikkuni Zohar 10:25b, concealed and revealed. Zohar 3:73a, 98b. At first the Torah uncovers her face to a person, and afterwards she conceals herself. Someone who is devoted to the life of the Spirit will go around searching for her. He will give himself heart and soul for her, longing and yearning with absolute devotion, until in the end the Torah will be revealed to him. At the beginning I had a small hint of a revelation on the subject of Purim, but it was very mysterious. That is, the revelation was not complete. It was nothing more than a hint, a flash. After this God helped me, for he helps me constantly, and the matter was revealed to me. The aspect of Purim that was revealed then was hidden and concealed from all the worlds. Only in the very highest worlds, which are far, far away, is this matter known. My task on that particular Purim was to repair the damage caused by the sin of Korach. When this was revealed to me, any connection between Purim and Korach seemed very remote to me, until God helped me, for the Holy Torah contains things that are very hidden. It was revealed to me that the letters of the word Purim are the initial letters of V'im Mipeit Panav Yameret Rosho Kereash, who, if his hair falls out near his face, it is frontal baldness, Leviticus chapter 13 verse 41. Kereash is the concept of Korach. The rest Rabbi Nachman did not explain. Later on, Rabbi Nachman said he had not been able to sleep the whole night after speaking about this because he was sorry he had revealed the matter. But he said that he consoled himself with the thought that he had still not revealed anything, and in fact, what is mentioned above is not the verse as it is written in the Torah. What is written there is V'im Mipeit Panav Yameret Rosho Jai Be'ash Hu. It is in the previous verse that the word Kereach is written. The entire subject is very obscure and mysterious. Happy is he who waits for the coming of the Redeemer. Then it will be possible to understand the Reb's holy words, 16 Adar, 217-91. Kislev 5570, Winter 1809, Breslov, Rabbi Nachman's dream. I was sitting in my room and not a single person came in to see me. I was very surprised. I went out into the other room, and there too there was not a single person. I went out to the large house in the study hall. There too there was not a single person. I thought I would go outside. I went outside and I saw that there were rows and rows of people standing there whispering among themselves. One of them would make a joke about me, another would snigger, someone else would make a face at me, and so on. Even my own followers were also against me. Some of them looked at me arrogantly, others were telling each other secrets about me, and so on. I called one of my followers and asked him, "What is this?" He replied. "How could you do this? How could it be that you could do such a thing?" I had absolutely no idea why they were joking about me. I asked this man to go and gather together a few of my supporters. He left me, and I didn't see any more of him. I thought to myself, what should I do? I decided to get away and go to another country. I arrived there, but things were exactly the same. People were standing there and talking about it because even there, they knew about the matter. I thought I would go and live in some forest. I got together with 5 of my supporters and went with them to the forest, and there we lived. Whenever we needed something to eat and so on, we would send one of the men to get us what we needed. I used to ask him if the uproar had died down. "No," he replied, "it's still very fierce." While we were living there, a certain old man came and called me and said he had something to tell me. I went with him and he started talking to me. "You dare to do such a thing," he said. "Do you not see how you have put your forebears to shame? Your grandfather Rabbi Nachman and your great-grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, of blessed memory. Think of the Holy Torah. Think of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. Are you not ashamed of yourself? How can you think of staying here? Will you be able to stay here forever? Your money will run out. You are physically weak. What will you do? And what's the idea of escaping to another country? Whatever way you look at it, it won't help you. If they don't know who you are there, you won't be able to stay there because they won't give you money. And if they do know who you are, you still won't be able to stay there because they will know about this matter. If that is how things are," I said, "and I'm a mere fugitive, at least I will have the world to come." "You think you'll have the world to come," he replied. "Even in hell you won't have any place to hide yourself after sinning like this. Go," I said. I would have thought you might have comforted me and spoken to me kindly. Now all you are doing is making things more painful. Get away." The old man went away. 17 Adar. While I was staying there, I thought to myself, if I'm staying here such a long time, chances are I could completely forget everything I've learned. I instructed the man we used to send to the city for what we needed to try to find some book there and bring it to me. He went to the city, but he didn't bring back a book. He said it was impossible to bring one because he certainly couldn't let anyone know who the book was for. But on the other hand, it was impossible to find a book in secrecy. I suffered greatly because I was a fugitive, and I didn't even have a book. For one can come to forget one's learning completely. Afterwards, the old man came back carrying a book under his arm. I asked him, "What's that you've got, a book?" "Give it to me," I asked, and he did. I took the book, but I had no idea how to position it. I opened it, but I simply couldn't understand it at all. It seemed as if it was in a different language and a different alphabet. I couldn't understand it at all, and it was very painful to me. I was afraid that even the men who were with me would leave me if they found out about this. The old man called me over again to speak to me. I went, and he started telling me off in the same vein as before. How could you do such a thing? Are you not ashamed of yourself? Even in hell you won't have anywhere to hide, I said to him. If it were someone from the upper world who was telling me this, I would believe him. I am from there, he said, and he showed me a sign. The well-known story of the Baal Shem Tov came to my mind, how the Baal Shem Tov started thinking he would not be granted the world to come, and he said, I love God even without the world to come. I threw my head down and turned away in great bitterness. As soon as I did so, all the different people the old man said I had shamed gathered before me. My grandfather and great-grandfather, the patriarchs and so on. And they quoted the verse, the fruit of the land will be their pride and beauty, Isaiah chapter 4 verse 2. They said to me, on the contrary, we will be proud of you. They brought me all my supporters and my children, because even my children had left me when all this started. And they spoke kind words like these, the opposite of what had happened before. 18 Adar. As to my throwing down my head in bitterness, if a person who transgressed the entire Torah 800 times had thrown his head down as bitterly as that, he would certainly have been forgiven. The other great goodness contained in this I do not wish to relate to you. Most surely it was good. Less than Tuesday night, the 19th of Shvat, 5570 1810, Breslov. Rabbi Nachman related that on the previous night he had had a very strange dream, the like of which he'd never before experienced. This dream contained an entire story that he did not disclose. He did say that he was given some garment to wear and was told to never ever remove it. He was also told to take off his socks, but he did not pay attention to dreams of this nature. The Rebbe also spoke about how weak he was. He explained the deeper meaning behind the tuberculosis from which he was suffering, and mentioned the pain he was experiencing in his side. There was another story that Rabbi Nachman related while he was still living in Zlatipolia. Though Reb Nozon writes that he did not hear it from the Rebbe personally. When he was finished relating the story, Rabbi Nachman insisted that it be reviewed, and said that this story would be beneficial for those who are here with us today, as well as those who are not present. Cf. Deuteronomy chapter 29 verse 14. You will see what will eventually become of this story, he added. He then warned against revealing it to strangers. If you do reveal it, I will still love you. But my love will be like Chikel when he is happy. His happiness isn't really happiness at all. He also said that all those present were responsible for each other in making certain that the story remained secret. There was one person in the group whom everyone knew could not be trusted to keep silent, as this man liked to talk a lot. Still, no one dared say anything to the Rebbe, preferring to keep their thoughts to themselves. And I take responsibility for him, Rabbi Nachman concluded. Later they questioned this man to see what he knew. It was exactly as the Rebbe said. There was no reason for concern. He remembered nothing at all, greater than 19 Adar. 218:92. Rabbi Nachman said that when he was young he was in the habit of eating very large amounts. He suffered because of it, and he gave up eating such quantities. But when he saw that he still had desire even for the little he was still eating, he changed his mind and started eating again. After all, what difference was there if he ate a little or a lot as long as he was still subject to his desire? Why should he destroy his body for nothing? He used to channel all his desires into the desire for eating. Once he was sitting at the table in his father-in-law's house during the third meal on Shabbat. He was sitting in a corner. It was dark in the house. The Rebbe occupied himself with his devotions in his own way as usual, and he started requesting that God should show him the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He promised God, when you show me this I will cast aside this desire also, namely the desire for eating. The Rebbe was very forceful in this matter, applying himself to his devotions in his own unique way. He fell asleep, and his great-grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, came to him in a dream, and quoted the verse, I provide grass in your field for your animals. Deuteronomy chapter 11 verse 15. When Rebbe Nachman woke up he was unable to understand the connection between the verse and his request. It occurred to him that it is mentioned in the Tikkuni Zohar that the word for grass, sav, is made up of the letters ayin, bet, shin. Ayin bet is bat ayin, the pupil of the eye. Shin is the three forefathers. That is, if you want to see the patriarchs, it is possible only if besadka livhemteka, grass in your field for your animals. That is, you must lashated habheimiet, destroy your animality, namely your desire for eating. Accordingly, the Rebbe cast off this desire as well. See Likuti Maharan I 39, 20 Adar. 219-93, Monday 24th ER 5570 1810. Human. Reb Nachman writes, the Rebbe told me a dream he had had that night. In the dream he saw that there was a wedding, and he too went to the wedding. He knew the name of the groom. He looked and saw there a man from the world to come, in other words a dead person. He was very surprised and said to himself, surely if people see him there will be a great commotion. He also knew the name of this dead person. The Rebbe said that the names of the groom and the dead person were not regular proper names. They were real shemo, holy names with whatever meanings and allusions they have, as do all holy names. After this the people there also saw the dead person. I spoke with them, Rabbi Nachman continued, and said, isn't this a dead person? Even so, they replied, and they found nothing unusual or original in this whatsoever. Afterwards, I thought I would prefer to go to some synagogue there that would be a better vantage point from which to watch the wedding. I turned around like this, and Rabbi Nachman demonstrated with his finger how he turned around, and I came to the synagogue. In the place where the wedding was going on they were singing for the groom, one young man is this, one groom is this. I knew the tune also. It was a beautiful tune, a joyous tune. I was watching this from the synagogue. Afterwards I thought I would prefer to go to my house. I arrived at my house where I found that the groom was lying on the ground. I shook him and awakened him. They are singing and singing for you, I said, and you are lying here. Reb Nachman writes, these matters are very obscure and hidden. Later the Rebbe himself said that it was something remarkable that over there they were singing for him so much, and over here he was lying down. The subject is very mysterious and concealed. The Rebbe said that in the dream it appeared that the place where the synagogue was had a different name, and the place where he went to his house had a different name. Reb Nachman adds, he said he knew but had forgotten. I am not sure if it was the tune he was referring to when he said he knew but had forgotten, or if he was referring to the names of the places. But as regards the holy names of the groom and the dead person, he said that he still knew them. The Rebbe said that there were other things to this dream as well. 21 Adar, 220-94. Once the Rebbe said, every Torah teaching has its story. Then he started telling the story of his lesson. Boaz said to Ruth, in Likutei Moharan I 65, which he had delivered during the same period. He told us, Azut had a daughter, and he sent her to the water to draw water into the pitcher. The Rebbe was unwilling to tell any more because he had already given the lesson. Regarding the Rebbe's statement that every Torah teaching has its story, there are aspects of the story of the one who was lying on the ground, see above number 209, in all of his lessons, but especially in the lesson 9 Tikkunim in Likutei Moharan I 20, which is a commentary on this story. As regards the story of the lost princess, which closes with the mountain of gold and the castle of pearl, see Rabbi Nachman's Stories number 1. In my opinion this story is related to the lesson starting Rabbi Shimon opened his discourse in Likutei Moharan I 60. The dream or vision about the chair, see above number 210, is related to the lesson Blow the Shofar on the New Moon in Likutei Moharan 2 1, which is a commentary on this episode. 221-95. I heard from one of the members of our group that on the eve of Yom Kippur after Kapparot, the Rebbe related to him the following. He saw that he was traveling in a certain forest, and the forest was large, indeed endless. He wanted to backtrack, but then someone came to him and told him that in this forest it was impossible to reach the end or the limit, because this forest was without end or limit. All the vessels in the world were formed from this forest. He showed him a way to leave the forest. Afterwards the Rebbe came to a certain river and he wanted to get to its end. Again someone came up to him and also told him that it was impossible to reach the end because this river has no end or limit, and all the world's inhabitants drink of the waters of this river. Again he showed him a way to leave. After this he came upon a mill that was standing by this river, and again someone came up to him and told him that this mill does the grinding for the entire world. Afterwards he again came to the forest he had been in before, and there he saw a certain blacksmith who lived and worked there in the forest. Rabbi Nachman was told that this blacksmith made vessels for the entire world. These matters are highly concealed. Rabbi Nachman then said, people tell a story. I see a story. May God make us worthy of understanding his awesome holy words. 22 Adar, 222-96. During Elul, the Rebbe related that he had had a dream in which he had the desire to go into a house to hear the blowing of the shofar. He passed by a certain house, and heard that the people there were singing and clapping their hands and dancing a great deal. They were leaping and dancing for joy like people in a state of great ecstasy. And I said to myself, Rabbi Nachman continued, this would surely be a good place to go in to hear the blowing of the shofar. Reb Nozan writes, I do not remember the rest of the story. One of those present said there is also an allusion in Likutei Moharan 110 to the idea that the mitzvah of shofar is bound up with the concept of hand clapping and dancing. Through the blast of the shofar, which is wind, we transcend another god, atheism. The wind, or spirit, is related to the concept of the spirit that blows in the 6 joints of the arms and the 6 joints of the legs. See the whole lesson where it is explained that the blowing of the shofar is a concept of hand clapping and dancing. The Rebbe nodded in agreement with the person who made this remark. Afterwards God sent me the thought that there is a verse that alludes to the idea of shofar as a concept of exultation and joy. As Yimala Sechak Pinu El Tilashanenu Raina, then our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with song. Psalms 126-2. The initial letters of the last words spell shofar. This connection between shofar and joy explains why after the verse, happy is the people that knows the shofar blast, Ibid 89-16, it is written, they will exult in your name all the day, Ibid 89-17. See Likutei Moharan 1175 for the idea that weeping should really stem from joy, because the word for weeping, bekiyah, is made up of the initial letters of the above verse, Bishimka Yegalin Kot Hayam. They will exult in your name all the day. See above number 139, 23 Adar, 223-97. Once there was a very wealthy man. He had a shop where he lived with his stock of various kinds of merchandise, as is the way with shopkeepers. But thieves came and robbed him of his wealth and possessions, and he lost a large part of what he had. Nevertheless, he went and collected up the remains, and was able to put himself back on his feet again. He went and purchased some more stock, and once again became a shopkeeper. Then some more thieves came and robbed him of whatever was left of his previous wealth. But once again he went and gathered together what little he could from the remnants of what was left to him, and from his wife's jewelry, and he succeeded in getting back on his feet again. He set up a store to provide himself and his household with their livelihood. Again thieves came and robbed him of whatever was left, and he became so impoverished that his house was completely empty. He went and collected together a miserable sum, bought a few bits and pieces and went around the villages like the poor tinkers who travel about with bundles of goods, needles, pipes, and similar small items. He went from village to village trading needles for chickens and eggs among the Gentiles. And this was how he earned the family bread. Once he was on his way from the villages carrying his little bit of stock and a few items of food when he was set upon by a bandit. The bandit was riding a horse and traveling with 2 enormous bundles, and he wanted to rob him. The man started weeping and pleading with the bandit, but the bandit paid no attention and robbed him of the little he had. The man was left with nothing at all, and he wept and wept, feeling very bitter indeed, as if his previous troubles had not been enough. First they stripped him of his wealth, and now they had torn from him even the meager livelihood he had left. Meanwhile he noticed that the bandit had fallen from his horse. He was trying to get up, but the horse was standing at his side, trampling his head with its hooves. The bandit fell back and died. The man went over to look and saw that his robber had fallen to the ground dead. He opened the robber's bundles, and there he found all the merchandise, wealth, and possessions they had stolen from him from beginning to end. He returned to his house in peace and became rich again as before. 24 Adar. Reb Nozan writes, I myself did not hear this story directly from the Rebbe, but from others who had heard it from him. Its full implications as intended by the Rebbe are certainly beyond my understanding, but this much I feel I do understand. The story offers tremendous encouragement to every single person. It does not matter what may happen to a person in his lifetime. They may rob him and plunder him. Even the little he has left, with which he tries to revive himself, they may stalk him for and strip him of. It may happen again and again, countless times. Even so, one should never despair of God's mercy and kindness. He should just raise his eyes to heaven each time and weep and cry out to God, pleading with him to look on his wretchedness and toil. Then, in the very end, the robber will suffer a fall he will never get up from, while his victim will get back all the holiness, all the devotions, and all the good that were robbed and stolen from him. He will return to his wealth and eternal goodness. 224-98 There is a story of a certain king who built himself a palace, and called 2 men and told them to decorate it for him. The king divided the palace into 2 parts. One half was the responsibility of the first man to decorate. The other was the responsibility of the second. The king fixed a time limit within which they had to complete their work. The two men went off. One of them struggled and toiled to teach himself the art of painting and plastering as well as he possibly could. He did so well that he was able to paint his part of the palace with the most beautiful and unusual murals. They contained animals and birds and the like, and everything was executed with wondrous beauty. As for the second man, he paid no attention to the king's command. He did nothing about it whatsoever. When it came near to the time when the work had to be completed, the first man had already finished his side in all its beauty and wonder. The second man then started to look at himself and ask what he had done. He had wasted his time on futility and nothingness without so much as thinking about the king's command. He started trying to figure out what he should do. He realized that in the few days left before the time ran out it would be impossible to make amends and teach himself painting so as to paint his part of the palace. The closing date was almost upon them. But he had an idea. He went and plastered his entire portion with a substance called pakist, which is a kind of shiny pitch. He plastered this dark pakist over his entire section, and the pakist was like a real mirror. It reflected everything, just like a mirror. Then he hung a curtain in front of his section to act as a partition between it and that of the other man, 25 Adar. When the appointed time came, the king went to inspect the work the men had done in the time they had been given. He looked at the first section with its wondrous and beautiful paintings of birds and so on, all executed with extraordinary skill. The second part was covered with a curtain, and behind it, darkness. Nothing whatsoever could be seen. The second man stood up and drew aside the curtain. The sun was shining, and all those remarkable paintings appeared in his section in their entirety because of the pakist which reflected everything like a mirror. Thus all the birds that were painted in the first man's section and all the other wondrous forms were all visible in the second man's section as well. Everything the king had seen in the first man's section he also saw in this man's section. Not only that, but even all the precious objects and furnishings that the king had brought into the palace were all visible in the section of the second man. And whatever other precious objects the king wanted to bring into the palace were all visible in the second man's section. This found favor in the eyes of the king. Reb Nachman writes, "More than this I do not remember. All this I myself heard directly from his holy lips." Likutei Moharan 1153. 225, 99. There is a story of a certain king who was small, that is, he was not very powerful. A powerful king came and conquered the small king, and he became his vassal. The powerful king also conquered other kings and countries. After a time the small king became strong, and he rose up against the great king together with the other kings he had defeated. They were able to reconquer their lands, and they also conquered some of the great king's provinces. The small king reflected on how he had seen the cycle repeat itself. One moment one power is victorious. The next another comes and conquers the first. Who knows what the day will bring? Perhaps the tables would be turned once again. Accordingly, he went and built fortifications by the seashore, and there in the fortress he hid all the treasure and wealth he had collected throughout his kingdom. He built chamber after chamber, and in each chamber he hid a particular coin. On the entrance to the room he hung a tablet on which was written the name of the coin that had been placed in that chamber. As for the main entrance to the fortress as a whole, it was in the form of a cunning device that made it impossible to enter, because if someone approached who did not know the exact route he had to take and every twist and turn he had to make while trying to enter, the device would cut off his head. Hung there was a tablet on which had been written in a number of languages the path that was necessary to take and the twists and turns that had to be made in order to enter without being harmed by the device. 26 Adar. After a time the sea flooded the island where the fortress was, and the whole matter was forgotten about. Several centuries passed. At last a certain king conquered the region, and the island was discovered. The king in question was small. He wanted to build a settlement there, so he made some Jews and other nationalities live there. As might be expected, the place was largely inhabited by poor people, as is usual in new areas. There was a certain poor man who had built a little house for himself by the sea. One Friday he went to dig for clay, and he found the tablet. However, he did not know what was written on it. He went to make inquiries among some of the old Gentiles to find out if they knew if there had been a settlement there once. No one knew or remembered. Then a poor man came who needed to find a place where he could eat for Shabbat. He went to the first poor man, who told him how he had found a tablet but did not know what was written there. "I will read what is written on it," he replied. The first one gave him the tablet, and he read everything that was written on it. So this poor Jew went and took all the treasures and riches that were there. 226, 100, on the subject of the various famous miracle workers, I heard a story that the Rebbe told to some other people. There was once a king who had 2 sons. One was wise, the other foolish. The king put the foolish son in charge of his treasuries, but the wise son was not given any appointment whatsoever. He just sat at the king's side the whole time. People found it very hard to understand why the one who was not wise had been given all this responsibility, with everyone coming to him to make deposits or withdrawals from the king's treasuries, while the son who was wise had no responsibilities whatsoever. The king replied, "What kind of achievement is it simply to take treasures that are all ready and prepared and distribute them to the world? This wise man sits at my side and thinks until he develops completely original ideas that I would never be able to come up with. These ideas enable me to conquer territories I would never have even known about. And these territories are the source of all my treasures. The treasurer simply takes these ready-prepared treasures and gives them out to everyone. The role of the wise one is far greater and more exalted than that of the treasurer, even though it may appear that he has no responsibility at all, for he is the source of all the treasures." Rabbi Nachman's Wisdom number 130, 27 Adar. 227, 101. The week of Torah reading Vayelech, Thursday during the 10 days of repentance 5670, 1809. Breslov. The Rebbe told us he had had a dream, but he did not know what it meant. The man who was one of his followers had passed away. The man was really dead, but the Rebbe did not know until today. In the dream, everyone was standing around in front of the Rebbe taking leave of him before they set off on their homeward journeys after the Rosh Hashanah gathering. This man who had passed away was also standing there. The Rebbe asked him, "Why were you not with us for Rosh Hashanah? But I've already gone to the next world," he replied. Rabbi Nachman went on, "I said to him, is that a reason? If a person has died, is he not permitted to come for Rosh Hashanah?" The man remained silent. Seeing as several people had spoken with me about the question of faith, I also spoke to him about this. Reb Nozan writes, "It would appear that the Rebbe understood that the man had lost his faith. I said to him, is there no one else besides me to go to? If you don't have faith in me, go and follow one of the other tzaddikim. Since you still have faith in the others, go and be their follower." He said, "Who should I go to?" I seem to recall that I indicated to him that he should become the follower of a particular well-known tzaddik. He replied, far from him." I told him, "Become the follower of someone else." I went through the list of all the well-known tzaddikim, but he said the same about all of them. He was far from them. I said to him, "If you are far from all of them and you have no one to follow, you might as well stay here as before and become my follower again." "From you," he exclaimed. Very far. 28 Adar. It was the middle of the day. The sun was directly overhead. The man raised himself up into the air until he rose up to the sun, and he traveled with the sun, descending gradually towards the horizon. Just like the afternoon sun, he literally came down to the ground just as the sun set, and he carried on traveling with the sun, until at midnight he reached the point directly underneath me together with the sun, because at midnight the sun is literally opposite a person's feet. At that moment, when he had descended so far that he was directly opposite me, I heard him crying in a loud voice, "Have you heard how far I am from you?" I do not know what this means. Rabbi Nachman continued, I had great pity on him. Surely the main struggle a person has is to reach the ultimate goal. This is the main task in life. In this life one cannot really savor the true meaning or feeling of being close to the tzaddik, owing to the gross physicality of the body and all the other obstacles. Therefore the main thing is to strive for the ultimate goal. Then, when you leave this world, after a long and full life, you will understand what you heard long before and what you will hear then. More than this, there will be the spiritual joys each one will attain. And if after all this you still do not succeed in drawing close, happy is the one who remains strong in his faith in God and the true tzaddik, and who fulfills what the tzaddik says. He will never be disgraced or put to shame either in this world or the world to come. On another occasion, the Rebbe said that a person must put great efforts into strengthening his faith in the tzaddik. His faith should be so strong that even after his death he will remain firm. Then they will be powerless to deceive him in the other world in any way. Their too great determination is needed to believe in the tzaddik. The Rebbe said there are souls of the wicked who oppose the tzaddik, and their aim is to deceive a person and keep him from making the effort to come to the tzaddik for his tikkun. But for one who remains strong in his faith, these opposing forces will be powerless to prevent him from going to the tzaddik to receive a tikkun for his soul. Even in the other world, The main obstacles are nothing but the distractions created by the accusers and destroyers found there. They confuse a person and weaken his resolve, deceiving him with various rumors about the Zadok, so as to prevent him from making the effort to reach him, even after a person leaves this world. As long as he is unworthy of reaching his final resting place, he is still not in the world of truth. On the contrary, his main punishment and pain come at the hands of the destroying forces that lead him to the world of desolation. There it appears to him as if he is still in this world. They deceive him in all kinds of ways, as is known from the literature discussing these subjects. However, when a person is determined and stubbornly refuses to listen to what they are saying, telling them, "I will not listen, all I want is to travel to the Zadok," they have no option but to leave him alone. There is no way they can prevent him because their only power lies in deceiving him, and he refuses to listen to them. 29 Adar. The Rebbe told a story about a Jew from White Russia who had come to live in Eretz Yisrael. He had traveled there with the well-known Zadok, the saintly Rabbi Nachman Mendel of Vitebsk, of blessed memory. It is well known how fierce the opposition to the Tzaddikim and the Chassidim was in the early days. This was especially true in Lithuania and White Russia. Anyone who wanted to become one of their followers had to face formidable obstacles. There in Israel it was agreed that this man should be sent abroad to raise money for the settlers, as was customary in those days. The man in question, the follower of Rabbi Nachman Mendel of Vitebsk, was traveling at sea in the course of his mission when he died. However, in Israel they knew nothing of this yet. After his death it appeared to him as if he was on a journey to Leipzig together with some members of his staff, just as he used to travel during his lifetime. For he had been a merchant with considerable interests, and he traveled to Leipzig regularly during his lifetime. Now, too, it seemed to him as if he was traveling there together with his assistant and his carriage driver, as usual. In the middle of the journey, he suddenly felt a tremendous longing to go to his Rebbe, Rabbi Nachman Mendel, in order to speak with him and experience his holiness. So great was his desire that he was willing to leave everything and break his journey in the middle in order to go directly to his Rebbe. He started telling his employees that this was what he wanted, but they laughed and put him off. How could he think of losing such an excellent business opportunity? Thus they prevented him from going. Then after a while he again felt another surge of desire and longing. Again he told his employees he wanted to travel to his Rebbe, and they again put him off, telling him it was impossible to lose such a wonderful business opportunity and just leave. They must go on to Leipzig. This time he also listened to them, and was again prevented from going. 1 Nisan. Later on he again felt a tremendous sense of arousal and enthusiasm. This time he told them he would not listen to a word they said to the contrary. All he wanted was to go to his Rebbe, and he would throw everything aside to be able to do so. No matter how much they tried to persuade him, using every kind of argument and excuse, how was it possible to do such a thing in the middle of an enterprise of this nature? He refused to listen to a word they said. He remained totally firm in his intention to go off immediately to his Rebbe. He ordered them to turn back and come with him to where his Rebbe was to be found. Seeing they were powerless to stop him with arguments and excuses, they got up and staged a rebellion, saying they refused to follow his instructions in something as unheard of as this. He retorted that they must do exactly as he wanted, but they refused to listen. He became extremely angry with them for ignoring his command, for he was their employer, and they were obliged to obey him in everything. In the course of this argument he was informed of the truth. He was already dead, and his fellow travelers were destroying angels who were leading him on and deceiving him. In that case, he said, "I am certainly determined that you should bring me at once to my Rebbe, Rabbi Nachman Mendel." And for our part, they replied, "We are certainly not prepared to take you to him." The argument became very fierce, with the Chassid insisting they take him to his Rebbe, and the destroying angels refusing to yield. Eventually, the case was brought before the heavenly court, which decided in his favor that his desire to be taken to his Rebbe must be honored at once. And that is exactly what happened. Without delay, he was taken to the sainted Rabbi Nachman Mendel of Vitebsk, who was still living in Eretz Yisrael. He was brought to the Zadok's house, and when he entered, one of the destroying angels went in with him. The Zadok was so frightened that he fainted. They brought him round, and afterwards he worked for about 8 days to bring about a tikkun, until in the end he succeeded. Only then did the Zadok announce to the other settlers that the man they had sent abroad had died. for as yet they knew nothing about this whatsoever. The Zadok told them the whole story. It was essential for them to be informed about his death in order to know how to proceed with their arrangements for raising money abroad for Eretz Yisrael. The Reb's purpose in telling the story was to emphasize the determination needed to draw close to the Zadok even in the other world after one's death. But the main thing is what happens in this world. A person who is strong and determined in his faith in this world will also be able to surmount the obstacles in the other world. For, according to the devotion shown by mortals in this world, so it is in the world to come. Zohar 1100a, 129b, 2 Nisan. I also heard it said in the Reb's name that he had offered advice as to how to make sure of coming to the Zadok after death. The advice was to take an oath to this effect while holding a holy object, such as a Torah scroll or tefillin. I myself did not hear this directly from the Rebbe, only from the lips of others who had heard it directly from him. Less than Reb Alter Tepliker heard this story about coming straight to the Zadok after death, from Reb David Hirsch of Damatrivka. The latter had it told to him by Reb Shlomo Magernitzer, the grandson of the Zadok, Rabbi Shlomo Lutzker, a disciple of the Maggid of Mezrich. Reb Shlomo Magernitzer's mother had brought him to Rabbi Nachman to be his attendant, in the hope that the Rebbe would find a suitable marriage partner for her son. It was while Reb Shlomo was in the Reb's service that the following story took place. In Medvedevka, there lived a man by the name of Reb Hirsch, who was one of the Reb's close followers. He had a son and a daughter. This only son contracted tuberculosis. But because Reb Hirsch did not understand the seriousness of the disease, he took the matter lightly. He did not think to even mention it to Rabbi Nachman, who was then visiting Medvedevka. Reb Hirsch's son-in-law did appreciate the gravity of the situation, and went to the Rebbe to ask that he pray for his brother-in-law's recovery. Rabbi Nachman's answer was, "I can do nothing for him in this world, but in the upper world I will be able to benefit him once he passes away." The Rebbe then asked that Reb Hirsch's son be told to come to speak with him, and he would tell him what he needed to know. Shocked by this disclosure, Reb Hirsch's son-in-law sought to stir the Reb's compassion so that Rebbe Nachman would work to nullify the decree and his brother-in-law would live on. How tragic it will be for Reb Hirsch, already an old man, to lose his only son. However, the Rebbe remained silent. Again the son-in-law tried to sway the Rebbe, and only when he finished did Rebbe Nachman respond, "Why are you pressuring me? Don't you know that if I work to help him so that he recovers, God will be obliged to take 13 other people from the world?" Zohar 3:205. And by our Father in heaven, all his children are equal. As the saying goes, when a man bruises his finger, the pain is felt by all. Besides, added Rebbe Nachman, perhaps you are one of the 13. Hearing this, Reb Hirsch's son-in-law retreated and went off to advise his brother-in-law to visit the Rebbe. 3 Nisan. When the sick man came, Rebbe Nachman spoke with him, after which the Rebbe returned home. Reb Hirsch's son passed away 2 months later, and his father mourned him greatly. During the mourning period, the son-in-law told Reb Hirsch everything he had heard from Rebbe Nachman when the latter had visited Medvedevka. Reb Hirsch's grief was very great, and he cried endlessly. Immediately after the 7-day mourning period, Reb Hirsch traveled to Breslov to see the Rebbe. Arriving at night, he quickly made his way over to Rebbe Nachman, who was already preparing for bed. Knocking on the door, he spoke with the Reb's attendant, Reb Shlomo Magernitzer, mentioned above, who informed Rebbe Nachman that Reb Hirsch of Medvedevka had come to see him. When Reb Hirsch entered the Reb's room, he began crying uncontrollably, and could not compose himself enough to speak. Rebbe Nachman consoled him. After all, the main offspring of the righteous are their good deeds, Rashi, Genesis chapter 6 verse 9. But Reb Hirsch would not be consoled by this, or any of the other things the Rebbe said to him. "What will be with my Kaddish after I die?" asked Reb Hirsch. "He was the only one who would have said Kaddish for me. In that case, I will be your Kaddish," exclaimed the Rebbe, "and I will teach you how to die." At this point, Rebbe Nachman motioned a carrot for his attendant to leave the room. Reb Shlomo, who very much wanted to hear what the Rebbe was about to say, closed the door behind him, but not all the way. Still, the only thing Reb Shlomo managed to hear was how Rebbe Nachman advised Reb Hirsch to take an oath over some holy object that after he dies, immediately after they seal his coffin, he wishes to be brought to the Rebbe. 4 Nisan, Reb Hirsch returned home. All this took place in the winter-time, and a while later Reb Shlomo, the attendant, also had reason to travel to Medvedevka. When he arrived, he found that a plague had taken the lives of a number of children there. The people of the town wanted to send someone to bring a redemption to Rebbe Nachman, but were not able to raise both the redemption money as well as the expenditures required to cover such a long journey. In the meantime, Reb Hirsch passed away. Before he was buried, the attendant, who was still in Medvedevka, related to Rabbi Nachman's followers what he had heard from behind the door when Reb Hirsch had come to the Rebbe in Breslov. He spoke of the oath, but no one knew whether Reb Hirsch had actually taken it before he passed away. The Reb's followers, including Reb Yudel, agreed on a plan. As they were carrying Reb Hirsch's body to be buried, a Torah scroll was brought out, and the deceased was told to take an oath that he would immediately go to Rabbi Nachman to inform him of the plague that was attacking the children of Medvedevka. Because of this oath, Reb Hirsch would have to go to the Rebbe, even if he himself had not previously followed the Reb's advice. 3 months later, Reb Shlomo the attendant returned to Breslov. When he came to Rabbi Nachman, the Rebbe asked him if he could remember when it was that Reb Hirsch had died. Reb Shlomo responded by recalling which month it had been, but he could not call to mind the exact day. "Was it not on such and such a day of the month?" said Rabbi Nachman. Yes. Reb Shlomo suddenly remembered that Reb Hirsch had indeed passed away on that date. "You see," said the Rebbe, "right after they closed his coffin, Reb Hirsch came to me, as if to say, I thought it would take some time, but he came instantly." Reb David Hirsch of Dmitrivka was personally told this story by Reb Shlomo the attendants 5 Nisan, 228, 102. I heard from others that the Rebbe once said, Emunat Human number 31. In Jerusalem there is a synagogue to which all the dead people on earth are brought. As soon as someone in this world dies, he is brought there at once to be judged as to where his place should be. There are people who die in Eretz Yisrael who are taken outside the land. Others who die outside may be brought to Eretz Yisrael, Zohar 2, 141. It is in this synagogue that the court that hands down these judgments sits and allocates each person the place he deserves. There are even cases where the verdict is that there is no place at all for the person concerned, and he is to be destroyed and cast into the hollow sling, 35, when the dead are brought there. They are brought in clothing. Sometimes a dead person's clothes are missing something. One person might be missing a sleeve, another a piece from the edge of his garment, and so on. Everything depends on a person's actions in his lifetime, because his clothing after death corresponds to his deeds. 36 The verdict depends on the clothes he has when he is brought there, and his place is allocated accordingly. Once a dead person was brought there completely naked. He had no clothes whatsoever. The verdict was that he should be cast into the hollow sling and destroyed, God forbid, because he was completely naked. However, a certain Zadok came and took one of his own garments and threw it over this person. The court asked him, "Why are you giving him one of your own garments?" The court took exception to this, because why should the dead man be given a garment and be saved with clothing that was not his? The Zadok answered, "I have to send this man on a mission for my own purposes, and for this reason I am entitled to dress him in my own garment. Surely you are aware that on occasion a nobleman may send his servant to another nobleman, and the servant delays, carrying out his bidding. His master asks him, 'Why have you not left yet, as I ordered?' The servant replies, 'Because I don't have the right clothes for going to the nobleman in question. He is very great, and it is impossible to go there in clothes that are not respectable.' The master answers, 'Quick, take one of my garments and put it on, and run quickly to the nobleman to do my bidding.' Similarly, I need to send this dead person on a mission of my own. For that reason I am giving him one of my garments. This is how the Zadok saved the dead man from the bitter penalty of the hollow sling." The Rebbe told this story to show the tremendous power of the true Zadok to save his followers in the world of truth. 6 Nisan, 229, 103. Once there was a certain king who traveled to a particular country where he saw very beautiful palaces. He was greatly impressed by these buildings, and when he returned home, he immediately hired artisans and craftsmen to build him palaces like the ones he had seen when he was abroad. They built him the palaces and decorated them with the most wonderful pictures. After the work of building and decorating was complete, the king made a great feast and sent dispatches throughout his kingdom announcing that anyone who wanted to view these palaces should come and see them. People came from all over the kingdom. From one particular city 2 men teamed up and traveled together to see the palaces the king had built. One of them was a Jew, the other a Gentile, a respectable individual of some importance. When they reached the gate of the palace, they saw that the gate was painted with a picture of a road. It was a most extraordinary road, on both sides of which there were fountains of water. By the side of each of the fountains a guard was posted. Walking at the edge of the road was a beggar. The beggar was extremely thirsty, but the guards were not willing to give him even a little water to drink. In the middle of the road, a fine gentleman was traveling in a coach. He asked the guard to hand him a little water. The first guard went and gave him the water, while the second guard went and gave the beggar some water to drink. The guard who had given water to the gentleman went over and poured hot ashes over the guard who had given water to the beggar. The Jew and the Gentile saw all this. The Gentile said, "Not fair." The Jew slapped him on the cheek and an argument developed. Eventually the king heard about it and sent for them. He asked the Jew first, "Why did you slap him on the cheek?" He answered, "Because he described the king's showpiece as being unfair." The king said to the Gentile, "Why did you say this? But how could one say it is not unfair?" He replied, "The one wants to drink and they won't allow him to, while the other asks that they should give it to him personally, and they do so. Not only that, but when the second guard allowed the beggar to drink, the guard who had personally handed the gentleman water poured hot ashes over him. After this, the king again asked the Jew, "Why did you hit him?" The Jew gave a subtle explanation of why they were prepared to give water to the gentleman, but they refused to give to the beggar. He explained how it was necessary that the gentleman should be given the water, while it was unnecessary for the beggar to be given any. More than this, the Rebbe did not say. He did not relate the details of the explanation given by the Jew as to why it was necessary to give to one but not the other. Afterwards, the Rebbe said that on the Shabbat eve every person has to go through all four worlds: Asaya, action; Yetzirah, formation; Bariah, creation; and Atzilut, emanation. The world of Asaya, the lowest world, is hard enough to go through, let alone the others. All this the Rebbe said one Shabbat night after the blessing over the bread.